Welcome to episode 61 of Stageworthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. Stageworthy is a podcast about people in Canadian theatre, featuring conversations with actors, directors, playwrights, and more. If you like what you hear, I hope you'll subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Google Music or whatever podcast app you use, and consider leaving a rating. It really helps out the podcast. If you want to drop me a line, you can find Stageworthy on Facebook and Twitter at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website at stageworthypodcast.com. My guest is actor, playwright, puppeteer, and magician Eric Woolfe. Eric is also the artistic director of Eldritch Theatre, a Toronto theatre company specializing in horror plays using puppetry, live actors, and parlour magic. Adriana introduced me to what you do with Eldritch Theatre, Eric. She said the words, it's magic puppet horror theatre.
Yeah.
And I immediately thought, that's the most amazing thing I've ever heard. But one of the things I've kind of been wondering is, for you, which came first, the magic puppet or horror?
Okay, well, this is a good story. It's also a long one, but it's a good story. So I've been an actor since I was 10 years old, and I'm rapidly approaching 46. Mm-hmm. So, I started professionally when I was 10. Mm-hmm. In my 20s, living in Toronto, there was a friend of mine that I'd grown up with who was moving to the city, and he was a musician. And I thought, well, I knew that unless we had a project that we were working on together, I'd never see him because he's a wonderful guy, but he's socially myopic. So I said, look, why don't we do this thing? And I had always loved, it's funny now because it sounds so square, but I'd always really loved the idea of Billy Bishop Goes to War. You had an actor, you had a guy who was really good at music, they were friends, they hung out together, and it was this. So I said, here, we'll do something like Billy Bishop, or you'll be on stage and you'll write music for it, and I'll play ukulele and sing. And I'd been a horror fan since I was a little kid, so I said, we'll make it a horror play, and you and I grew up together, so it'll be a horror play about puberty, and I'll play all the characters. However, I, at that time, was quite close to Rod Beatty, who does all the Wingfield plays. For the people who don't know, I don't know why you wouldn't, but it's a play about a series of plays about a Bay Street executive who sells his firm to become a farmer, and Rod, who's been doing these plays for years, plays all the characters. Right. But he's so good at it, when you think back and remember them, you actually remember all these other people on stage. Yeah. I saw one night, this was just before this happened, went to see one of them, and Rod was really sick. So the protagonist character, Wingfield, had a cold and kept having to drink water and blow his nose. And Rod playing Wingfield really looked like he was going to die. But none of the other characters even had a sniffle. It was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. So as long as Rod was doing these plays, I thought there was no way I'm doing a one-person show where I step in and out of other characters. Because if you can't do it like that, it's like writing symphonies in the time of Mozart. You just shouldn't do it. So I thought puppets were cool and creepy, so without knowing anything about it really, I said, well, we'll just make puppets. So I gathered up a bunch of garbage and paper mache and made all the other characters out of puppets, and then we did this thing called The Strange Eerie Memoirs of Billy Wuthergloom for Summer Works, and then remounted it, and it was a big hit. And a big critical success. And so all of a sudden, overnight, after having been an actor for whatever it was at the time, 20 some odd years, I became that horror puppet guy. That was neat. Let's do it again. So for a number of years, the shows would get bigger. There'd be more people and more puppets, and my skills at building the puppets became more ornate and more skilled, and so the shows kind of got bigger and bigger to a point up to about 10 years ago when I sort of got the sense that the independent theater ecology was about to contract. Shows weren't going to be able to keep getting bigger and bigger because the money was about to become suddenly finite.
Yeah.
So I remember my second son had just been born, and I remember I remember the exact chair I was sitting in when I had the idea, and I'd always kind of been interested in magic as an art without really knowing anything about it. And it occurred to me that quite naively that you could use magic in the support of a narrative in the same way that you use songs in a musical. So it could you advance the plot, or provide a metaphor for something, or illuminate an idea of a character. And what tickled me about the idea is that you can do magic on a little tablecloth, or you can do magic that fills a whole amphitheater. And whether you're making an elephant disappear or making a coin disappear, it's essentially thematically the same idea. And the other thing that excited me about it is that no one really had tried this before. Now, what I didn't realize was that it was a little bit like being 40 years old and saying you're going to become a prima ballerina. So there was a learning curve that's been the last 10 years of kind of the theater's company's existence, and my downtime has been spent making coins disappear and learning how to levitate a potato and do all that to make it happen.
How did it take you to feel like you were confident enough to do some of those on a stage in front of people?
Well, still not always. Well, it's been 10 years, and this last show was sort of the first one where the magic didn't become a really daunting... Where the magic had become kind of an organic part of the process and not a terrifying one. I mean, there was so I had the idea in 2006, and the magic didn't really get rolled out till 2009, 2010. And the first show we did it in, I mean, we started sort of dropping it in, let's do this one Victorian illusion, and this is going to be the finale is going to be, we're going to bring a puppet to life with Pepper's ghost. And that would be the one thing, the one set piece. But the Doc Wuthergloom's Haunted Medicine show was the first solo show that we did, and the first time it was, okay, let's do wall-to-wall puppets and magic and see how it works. And it had way too much magic. It's now, look back at it, I mean, I'm very proud of it, and I love it when we get a chance to do it again. It's been one of our most successful shows, but it takes an hour to load all that crap in my pockets and set all the little things, because when you're starting out, I think in any art, when you're starting out, you want to show how good you are at it and how hard you've worked.
Of course, yes.
So if we can shove this little thing in here, let's shove this little thing in here. So it becomes, there's so much, because you want to prove yourself.
Right.
And then, so the last two shows, it's been a little bit more relaxed, and now I kind of feel like, okay, I've got nothing to prove. Now we can just make it good. Now let's make it easier instead of making it harder.
That's sort of an interesting metaphor for a life in New York sometimes, especially if you're a creator.
Yeah, well, that's kind of, I guess that's I remember when I was a young actor, everybody saying, there are no good actors under the age of 36. And I took great offense to that when I was 20.
Yeah.
But then when I was 36, I went, because I'm not on stage trying to show everyone my homework anymore. Yeah. I'm not trying to prove myself. I'm just doing my job.
Yeah.
And I'm not making sure everyone can see me sweat, so they take me seriously. And I think that's the difference between being a starting artist and an established one in any field.
Then on the other side, there's also the go big or go home. Like if you're starting out at a thing, you want to make a splash. Because I know I worked with a company called Keystone Theatre, and we did silent film on stage. So our first show was like this massive epic called The Belle of Winnipeg, and it took us once we started, it took 4 years to get from create how do you do silent film on stage to this show, and then sets and costumes and video elements, and it was like massive. And after we did that, we were like, well, we can never do this again.
Yeah.
I mean, we thought so, but then it was like, well, it cost way too much to do this again.
Yeah.
So, the next thing that we did was like, how do we create a thing that can tour, like the smallest possible thing?
Yeah.
So it's like, make your splash is the other side. And I'm like...
Well, one can make a splash. I'm not talking about... I mean, I think this is sort of two different conversations, right? Because I firmly believe that at least for the next 15 years... the secret to having a successful career in theater is finding the smallest way to do something. I mean, I'm now, in the last few years, I've been much more interested in what can we do that 20 people can see and turn a profit at and make it really good and really spectacular than how can we make a show that 1,000 people will see and fill this. Because then you're running after your efforts are going to something that isn't as rewarding.
Yes, yeah.
And it's harder because I don't think the audiences have actually shrunk. I really don't. But I think they're not... The people who go to theater aren't the people who used to go to theater, and the people who do go to theater aren't going to the same kinds of theater. It's much... Everybody's going to their own little niche.
Yeah.
So I think like doing something big versus doing something small is different than show everybody how hard you're working just do the work. Do the work and don't because if you're trying to drum up a sweat, you're not you're spending energy drumming up the sweat. You're not spending effort moving the piano. If you can move the piano without sweating, that's all the better.
Right. The show that you did this past fall.
The Harrowing of Brimstone Macready. Which all my titles are too long.
Well, it's
terrible.
But the thing is, like, does it? I don't know. I think the title says something about this show. I don't think it's like. I don't think. I think you could. I tend to write titles that are far too short.
Right.
The something. Like that's my title. It's like the something. And I often think you could probably be a little more creative with your titles. I don't think there's anything about wrong with a long title. It says something about the show.
Yeah.
Is it the third show that you've done in this sort of like solo style?
Oh no, probably not. It is. Let's see. It was Eldritch Theatre's 12th original play and our 23rd production. As far as solo shows, it's... I mean, we've never been able to afford... I mean, the most people we've ever put on any stage is 4. And so usually it's, 2 is the... actually, that's not true. Sideshow the Damned had 5. But that was back in the day when you could afford 5.
Yeah.
And then nobody got paid anyway. Should the sort of the recent the puppets magic all Eric all the time, there have been like 3 of those, which is just what you said, isn't it? And I was like, no, and then I count them and it's 3.
Have you done one each year in the past few years?
Well, we try to hit every Halloween. It doesn't really work out with grants and with, but we try to have there have been remounts, but we try to have a new show every Halloween, and it kind of works out to a new show every other year.
Well, that's good. I mean, the show that I was at for Brimstone Macready, there were definitely people there who had come to see you.
Oh no, we've like the same. We've got like a really. I mean, we've been around since our first show was 2000, 1999. So we've been around. And we have we've got a loyal audience. We've got people who drive in from North Bay. We've got, and a lot of them don't go to other theater. A lot of them are under 40. Most of them are under 40. A lot of them aren't. They're like all walks of life. Yeah. And they come, and some of them come see the same shows like over and over and over. Like there are people who've seen Doc Wuthergloom 5 times. We've done it 6. They've seen it 5. And those are real people. Those aren't my Goonie friends who are there because they're on comps, which is really neat, right? Like you don't want to. I mean, I sometimes I wish that we had we had our audience numbers were, why don't we sell out every time we do, but we do. Why are we in this tiny theater that only seats 50? But on the other hand, like we've got, if I don't do it, if we happen to miss a Halloween, I get 20 angry emails from, I'm a mortician and I always bring my family and what are we going to do this Halloween if there's no creepy puppet thing?
There's something really kind of amazing of like the people are angry if you don't do a thing.
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah.
People who miss it when it's not there, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm always floored when I do something and there's somebody I don't know tells me, "Oh, I bought tickets to that," and I'm like,
"Yeah, I know." I'm always surprised too. The fact that anyone even remotely cares.
Yeah.
Because I don't. The fact that people care really shocks and moves me. I'm always surprised.
What's kind of interesting for me, I mean, there's been a lot of hand-wringing in indie theater for several years about where's the audience going and that sort of thing. And I remember...
Well, go ahead.
Just a couple of years ago, there was a big powwow, and I think I mentioned it before on the podcast about, I think there are two I put together this thing, and it ended up being at Theatre Pass Rye.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be this conversation, where's the audience going?
Yeah.
And it ended up just being a bitch session rather than offering
of course,
solutions. Right? But I mean, it is that thing, is like, how do you get the audiences out? And one of the things that I keep hearing is offer them something they can't get on Netflix.
Or offer them something they can't get. I mean, I know no one's coming to see indie theater. No one's coming. Well, of course, no one's coming to see indie theater because you're remounting a David Mamet play that was old 30 years. Like, who wants to see yet another production of American Buffalo? Like, why? Like, if you're going to be. And I don't. It's not just the indies. It's sort of across the boards, right? Like, if I'm say a couple in my 30s working a 9-to-5 job and I want to do something on a Friday night, I'm not going to say let's go see this thing that we studied in high school. Yeah. Remember, I got a B- on that essay. Yeah. Let's go. Yeah. So stop it. It doesn't don't stop it. I've seen Glass Menagerie. I've been in Glass Menagerie. It's a really good play. Stop it. Do something new.
Do something new. We can't tie our horses to the same old shows and expect people to come and see them again and again.
No matter how good it is, right? No matter how good it is or how rewarding it is to act in, or how. And the same. I mean, I have a real. Using theater to make a political point is another thing. I suppose you can use a cannon to swat that fly, but there are better uses for the cannon, and there are easier ways to kill the fly. I mean, because then you're doing, like, don't do theater. Don't try to sell people theater because it's good for them. Mm-hmm. I have been to some restaurants that serve a wonderful broccoli dish.
Yeah.
They don't tell me this broccoli, you have to eat this broccoli because it's going to be good for you. There may be broccoli on the plate, but they're not advertising it as broccoli.
No.
And I think there's a tendency to do that as theater artists.
I often get tired of being told that the theater that it's like, this is good for you, or this is super important, you have to see this. Like, I don't necessarily want to see theater that's important with a capital I. I kind of want to be entertained first. And
no, well, if you can't, I remember this is sort of the one thing I learned at theater school. The one thing that kind of stuck with me that was worth my 2 years before I quit was that I had a teacher say, well, look, entertaining someone for 2 minutes is really hard. If you can keep someone interested for 2 minutes, then it doesn't matter what you say. If you can't, it doesn't matter what you say. Yeah. Right? Like you have to engage people before you preach to them. And if you have them engaged, if you've actually engaged them, then you are speaking to them on a level that is more complex and has greater resonance than selling them a political message that they already agree with anyway, or they wouldn't have bought the ticket.
Yeah.
Right? Like who...
Yeah.
There was a reason that Shaw had to spend so much time writing essays about why he was better than Shakespeare. It was because he actually wasn't.
Yeah.
And the reason he wasn't is because of the untidiness that he was always criticizing Shakespeare for, because of that irrational, emotional... that's what... it's a tired cliche, but, I remember reading somewhere that art supplies for society what dreams supply for the individual. And you don't... Nobody ever woke up from a dream about flying because you're trying to escape from a giant monster made of toilet paper and then converted to social Marxism as a result. Like, it's not how we work.
Right.
So stop it. Or know that the real meat of what you're doing is actually something else.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned theater school. Can I ask what theater school you went to and then dropped out of?
Yeah,
you can say that.
You can ask. I don't know. I like to pretend I didn't go to school. And I did, but I like to pretend I didn't go.
Is it because you felt like you didn't get enough out of the school?
Well, because I was, I grew up backstage, right? Like I worked so much by the time I had started theater school. It was in some ways useful to have a place where I could hone my skills without having to chase down a next job.
Right.
It probably, in my late teens and early 20s, protected me from... I don't know. Yeah.
The thing is that the theater school is different for each individual.
Yeah.
And I know people who've had amazing experiences, people who've had horrible experiences. My own was somewhere in between.
Yeah.
And you get out of... And I actually figured that I didn't actually realize everything that I'd learned until about 20 years after I'd left.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, that's why we did this thing, sort of.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
But
where did you go?
I went to George Brown.
Yeah, well, yeah. See, George Brown was the place I went was in its dying days of usefulness when I was there. I had a decent class. It was 2 years I could have. It put me in a fortuitous place in terms of timing and when I could be released into the stream that led to some jobs that I'm glad I did.
You mentioned that you've been doing theater since you were 10 years old.
Yep.
So what was it? Were you somebody who, did you want to be in theater when you were a kid, or did your family say, we're going?
No. Well, when I was 5, when I was just before my 5th birthday, my parents had a family called the Titcombs over, and Gary Titcomb was loudly singing when I was trying to sleep. And I went downstairs and I yelled at everybody for loudly singing. And when my mom came to tuck me back in and apologize, she said, "I'm sorry. Gary Titcomb was singing the words to Oliver." And I said, "What's Oliver?" And she said, "It's a play. It's going on in the park. Why don't we take you to see it for your birthday?" And so we went to see this thing that had kids singing in it, and this guy threw this prostitute off a bridge and she died, and it was fantastic. And I remember turning to my mother and saying, "That's what I want to do when I grow up." And I hope, and she looked at me with horror, either because I was saying, she was worried I was saying I want to throw a prostitute off a bridge, or I want to be an actor. Either idea terrified her, and then sort of that kind of became my driving passion. So I had them enroll me in classes, and I auditioned for, a couple of different productions of A Christmas Carol, and ended up, it was in London, Ontario, so I ended up working at the Grand Theatre with some great people. And then when I was 15, I landed the part of Eugene in a production of Brighton Beach Memoirs at the Grand Theatre that Martha Henry directed, and then we ended up doing all 3, and I became the only actor in the world who'd done all 3 parts at all the right ages at the same theatre, which I thought was cool. Apparently Neil Simon thought was cool. Someone told him about it. Tony Randall told him about it. You know, so so I had this kind of really neat career in my teens doing theater kind of all across the country, and then.
And it's something that you kept doing, because, you know, I remember some of the things that I wanted to do when I was like 5 and started to do. I'm not doing anymore.
Yeah.
So you really, it stuck with it. It was like a thing that became a real passion for you.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. I mean, often I think I wish I could go back in time and develop another skill or interest. But I don't know what that would be. If I did, I would go do it.
I mean, that is the thing, is that everybody always says, you know, if you can do anything else, do it in this business. You know, if there's something else that can make you happy, you should probably do that.
Yeah.
Because this business is only for people who really just can't really do anything else, because they couldn't be happy doing anything else. It's too.
I don't know. I don't even know I'm terribly happy doing it. To tell you the truth, most of the time. But I don't know what I've kind of burned all my other bridges. Right? It's not like. I'm almost 46. It's not like it's too late for me to be a dentist.
Well, maybe a dentist, yes. Well, I mean, you could be an elderly dentist one day with your hand shaking.
I could be, yeah. Well, you know, that's about it, right?
You terrify children when they come in, and you're like, "All right, open wide."
Yeah.
Your hand's shaking. In terms of the this Eldritch theater and the shows that you create, does it take about 2 years to create a show from like idea to like
it
to
depends.
have a script, or do you
there are a lot of things in play. I mean, sometimes actually I was thinking about this on the way over. Sometimes it's like 10, 11 ideas, 11 years kind of teasing at an idea before it pays off. And sometimes it's like, I know, let's write a play about a flea circus. And then 3 months later, there's a play about a flea circus. So it sort of depends. It depends on, I don't know.
Do you have like a file of all the ideas that you have? Like
I used to, but I have kids and I'm lazy and I can't. I don't even know anymore. Like we're working this thing that we're about to do a little workshop on. Is this play called Space Opera Zero. That's it's based on Middleton's The Changeling. And it was written for Kimon Perehennick and Rebecca Northen, and Melanie McNeil, a resident designer, and I wanted to do something that was like a 1930s pulp, weird tales, space adventure, and all those different ideas come back from all different places, and I never thought they were all the same play. And it really only occurred to me yesterday how many different paths have kind of led to this one script. If you asked me this a week ago, I would have said, oh yeah, I just sat down and wrote that script. And it's like, oh no, but wait a minute. We talked about doing a space thing right after Sideshow of the Damned. That's like 17 years that one's been percolating away.
Do you? I mean, you have this, not really a deadline, but you're expecting to do something each Halloween.
Well, we try to hit that kind of like we did how I mean, when you're in it, like the big indie question is like, well, it used to be, well, where the hell are we going to find a space? It takes 3 years to get a space, and now it's like you call one of the storefronts, and if they don't happen to close, you're like.
There's only a couple standing.
Well, yay, Red Sandcastle.
Yeah.
What was the question?
Oh, just about like what you have like.
Oh yeah. So what happened was we did like 2 Halloweens in a row, and then Now Magazine was like, it wouldn't be Halloween without an Eldritch theater show. We're like, yeah, right. And now, I don't even think it was 2 in a row. I think it was like we did the Babysitter in 2006. We did the Babysitter for Halloween, and then 4 years later we did another show on Halloween, and then. Oh, well, it's a tradition. Oh, well, if it's an annual tradition and people, okay, then it's a tradition.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Call it a tradition. It's like, do it. I mean, Soul Pepper is like every Christmas doing the same 2 guys doing the lead roles in a Christmas Carol, so you might as well. I mean...
Yeah, well, that's it. So Eldritch Theater somehow... And now everybody says we're a Halloween tradition. Now it's like... Because now wrote this thing and we said, okay, let's run with that. And now Okay, it's Halloween. We got to do something.
Is that something like? Do you, when you leave Red Sandcastle from like this Halloween, do you say, okay, so you've got us penciled in for next Halloween, and just know that you've got to do something, or do you?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I read in the paper the other day that the Red Sandcastle is chiefly known for Eldritch Theater's horror puppet magic shows. I read that. I just read someone posted that. I'm like, oh, right, that's what it's. Woohoo! Well, 65 other shows in there during the year, but it's known for. I don't. I usually call Rosemary in, I guess, February.
Yeah.
I guess that's coming up.
It's coming up, yeah.
It's coming up. Pencil us in. But it's great, right? Like it used to be, before those places opened up, you're trying to find, you want to be in a theater that's under 100 seats because otherwise equity's up your butt for having, so all the salaries have to go up. But who really has more than 50 people in the audience ever anyway, if not fewer? So the last time we did a show that wasn't at a pop-up venue, it was 1/3 of the budget just went to the rent.
Yeah.
So
before this, the storefronts and similar spaces opened, it's like the spaces were so expensive.
Well, that's just it, right? So there was that thing, that big powwow of what are we going to do? Independent theaters dying. Where did the audience come from? It has never actually been easier to put on a show.
No,
because the rent is really cheap. You can run the box office for free. You never used to be able to do that.
Yeah.
You used to have to print posters that people just tore down anyway. Now you don't. You can market on social media for a fraction of what it cost in the olden days to print up 200 postcards that people just threw out or your actors were too lazy to hand out. It's so easy now.
Yeah.
I don't know what everybody's whining about, except that there's so much of it.
There's a lot of it. And that might be... I mean, there's... I go, there's this fringe mentality, the fringe festival mentality that sort of picked up when I was doing a show in Montreal, and Cameron Moore does this, his fringe, his Montreal Fringe. It's like Fringe Promotion 101.
Yeah.
It's a great little thing that she does. And one of the things she says is there's audience enough for everyone.
Yeah.
And I still believe that, but I also believe that we have a tendency in indie theater to hold on to our audience. This is my audience, and I'm keeping it here very safe, and you can't have it, you can't look at it. And if we could sort of like pool those together, like, because your audience is my audience, is their audience.
Well, yeah, sure.
There are people who want to see theater.
Sure, but honestly, I don't know my audience is... I mean, I think we've got a nice little Venn diagram, but actually... a chunk, I'm reasonably positive, a significant chunk of my audience doesn't care about that production of American Buffalo. That they just saw this ad 10 years ago for this horror puppet thing, and they went, there's such a thing of a horror puppet thing, let's go to that. Oh my God, he made a potato float right in front of my face. Let's go see that again. And I don't know that they're the people who... some of them are, right? Some of them, hey, Barbara Finger wrote Asher, it's always so great to see you. But the guy with the tattooed neck who comes in and, where's Doc Wuthergloom? Is he in this show? I don't think, I love that guy. I love him. I don't think he cares about your production of Glass Menagerie.
No,
Maybe
he
does.
He probably doesn't.
Maybe he does, but that's...
Well, maybe he's hungry for something that's not those classics. Maybe he's a theater brouhaha type person. He doesn't know it yet because he doesn't know who the fuck they are.
Yeah, well, fair enough. Fair enough.
But,
so if you want us to put your flyer on your seat, we'll do that. Because it's not as you say, it isn't keeping my audience from noticing your show doesn't actually help anybody.
No, it helps nobody.
But I think that it's it's so easy in this day and age, no matter what kind of entertainment you're interested in, to find exactly what you want to see when you want to see it.
Yeah.
That you can't... I think you can no longer oh, this is we've got, everybody's going to want to come see this because the quality's so good. The quality, people don't just come to see something that's good anymore. If you can watch any movie that's ever been made ever on your phone without leaving your bed.
Yeah.
So if you want someone to get out of their bed to come see your thing, it's not just enough that it has to be good. It has to be good, and it has to be something that they didn't think to Google.
Yeah. Something that they didn't expect. A lot of times. It was an unexpected quality. I mean, the Brimstone McCready, there was a lot to that I didn't expect.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know how that comes together, but it was, really, it was a night of something that I couldn't get anywhere else.
Well, okay. What parts of it were?
I think.
Tell me more. Tell me more about my great work.
So for me, it was so it was one guy, but it's a cast of it's a large cast. Yep. So the puppets are one thing. Yeah. It's the combination for me of there's a mood that happened in the room.
Yep.
When the curtain by the door closed and the show starts there.
Yep.
And then you've got the magic, and it's up close magic. Even if you're not one of the people who's sitting
right
by
beside
the thing, it's still because you've got the camera, so you can sort of see like the card tricks and things like that in a way that you probably couldn't. Yeah. Also, there was the some of the stuff that you did with the camera and like telling a story with like pictures and some moving stuff that way. Yeah. It's just like the experience of all of that together and live in a room, which has a dynamism that doesn't really happen because I'm passive when I'm watching a film. Yeah. When I'm in the room with somebody, I'm more active.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, okay. Thank you. The thing, too, about that show is that that feeling and those things you described don't happen with every show either, right? So even the people who see everything 4 or 5 times don't necessarily know what to expect. They know they're going to get puppets. They know it's going to be spooky. They know it's going to be funny. They don't know what combination it's going to be in. We sometimes the puppets are 15 feet tall. Sometimes they're tiny little things that sit on a tabletop. Sometimes we take up the whole room. Sometimes it all happens around a little table. Sometimes both those things happen in one show. So we try to keep those, even the familiar elements, as varied as we possibly can. I think a lot of the kind of theater community too, because most independent theater is only seen by theater people, right? And art and Dylan Trowbridge, who directed the harrowing of Brimstone McCready, he's never seen any of our shows, and this was the first show of ours he had directed. And after the opening, it might have been a few days into the run, he looked at me and he said, "I've never seen such a crowded theater with no other theater people in it." And I was like, "Yeah, I told you."
That is definitely a unique thing in indie theater. I I used to work in a couple of the big houses, the Irish houses, and Usher. You mostly don't see theater people.
No, you don't. But that's a different. Because what theater people can afford $300 a seat?
Well, there's that. And then for indie theater, you are right. Though, it has a tendency to be like other theater people going to see shows. It was very, very unique to find an audience of primarily non-theater people.
Well, and I think part of that is because we sort of get dismissed as, oh yeah, I heard those shows are great. They're the kind of that campy horror puppet thing, and there's like, oh, it's probably like that. That I guess it's kind of like the Evil Dead show, or like people sort of. Mm-hmm.
Well, I
don't know. It's a mystery to me. I don't know why we get.
I think a lot of times people like to identify a thing and think, well, puppets, horror. It's not art. Whatever it is that people are thinking to themselves. Yeah. They're missing out.
Yeah.
But it is one of those indie things. That is like who goes to see indie theater? People who are in indie theater. Yeah. People who are reviewers. People who are on the boards, and people who are maybe some of the public. Depending on the show.
Yeah, it's funny.
But then, I mean, there are other shows that start indie. Shas Gallery, for example, from Storefront, which then went on to Soul Pepper and did so well. They only scheduled it for 2 weeks and they held it over for another, which was a ton of fun.
That's a weird new Canadian problem too. That's kind of developed since I don't know, Drowsy Chaperone. Suddenly, the Fringe became. The Fringe Festival became
like a feeder for like the big theaters.
Well, yeah, when theaters used to commission and develop work,
and now they just look for it.
And now let's go see. I hear this thing at the storefront is actually good. Let's see it and kick it upstairs.
I kind of feel like that's a relatively uniquely Toronto thing. In terms of there's a lot of because Toronto is pretty uniquely focused on itself where Fringe is concerned. And
yes, that's true. Well, Toronto's uniquely focused on itself as far as theatre's concerned.
This is true.
Has always been that way.
This is true. I do find the Fringe has that tendency of being like, what we're looking for is the next Drowsy Chaperone, the next Kim's Convenience, the next The Kink in Her Hair.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of the other Fringe festivals, like if I go to Winnipeg or I go to Edmonton, they're just looking for the next interesting thing they can see rather than the next thing that can be like translated into something that becomes a TV show.
Yeah, well, and an hour long thing you can pay for out of your pocket change in the lint in the bottom of your couch should be different than this goes. This is our big main stage.
Yeah.
The two things shouldn't feed into each other because what happens then is both audiences get shortchanged, right? Because you're always the people who want to see the people who want to pay $200 for a ticket don't get to see anything. Don't get to see the kind of spectacle, the homegrown spectacle that they would get to see unless unless it's something that's toured in. And the people who want to see something that's an hour long and kind of dingy don't get that. I mean, that said, Kim's Convenience sure is a good play, and
I mean, yes, it was.
But I've always found that a little bit a puzzling. I found that a puzzling trend.
It is a puzzling thing. I know there's some people who do the Western Fringes who won't come to Toronto because they're told that people have told them they're just not interested in what you're going to be doing.
Well, Toronto Now magazine once referred to me as Fringe staple Eric Woolfe, and look, I've never done the Fringe. I acted once in a Fringe production in 1990, and that was. But apparently, according to Toronto Magazine, I'm a Fringe staple, which tells you something about it.
You did do a summer works?
I did. We did. I've done summer works twice when Eldritch Theatre was first getting started, and we've done the Fringe once, and the rest of the time we've produced it outside of festivals. And
well, you can't always trust what the media is going to say.
No, but I just find that an interesting. I mean, it tells you. I found it an interesting symptom of a larger outlook on how theater actually works. Is that we don't do our stuff actually is even our small stuff is too big for a Fringe thing because you have to make the thing for the potato to levitate. And I can't strike that in half an hour.
No.
So we don't do that. Also, I like to pay my team as well as I possibly can, and I don't. They're all too good, and they work too hard to make $12.
No. Yeah.
Right. So we don't. You just think it's weird. So you're saying it's a fringe thing, but it's not. They're actually. It's a different. It's weird, but it's not.
It's not. It's not. Fringe.
It's not part of that.
Because you could never get that out of a space in an hour.
No.
I mean, you talk about the having the wanting to pay. I think a lot of people want to pay people. Just go into it and they don't know how. So. I mean, you mentioned grants and things like that.
Yeah.
Did you, as somebody who from a business point of view, did you start applying for grants like right near the beginning, or did you do any of the I'm just paying for this out of my pocket thing for a while?
It was pretty soon before we went. Oh well, like the first we did Billy Wuthergloom at the. Oh, it seems like so long ago. So Billy Wuthergloom was a summer work show. That was the first thing I wrote. It was the first thing I produced. It was a big hit. I said, as I think everybody does when they have a big hit in a festival, is, I can do this on my own. I can do this on my own. And I crunched the numbers in my head. And I could do this if I just had, I could do this. And so I mounted it out of pocket and made the money back, but it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
It was, and then we were ready to do a show called Grendelmaus, which we had a modest amount of grants for. But I got cast in The Lion King, which postponed Grendelmaus for a year, but in order to still have something to do, I wrote Sideshow the Damned for Summer Works, and then, because I'm slow to learn, hey, let's put it on our own. And then we put it on as an equity co-op, and everybody busted their ass and made $260, and it was just like, okay, well, we don't do that anymore, because that's not, you can't work with this caliber of artist and then say, sorry, enjoy your groceries today.
Yeah, no.
Right? So I think it's immoral to write a show with a cast of 12 and know that you're not going to be able to pay them at least sort of. Like, I'm not even, right? Like, it's not even like I'm paying, like, at least kind of try to pay them what they'd make doing something, right? Yeah. And if you can't, let them take home the TV you used.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I just think you're kind of, it's not fair.
Well, it's hard because, I mean, it's that whole, you do it for the exposure, but you can't, like, buy groceries with your exposure.
Well, and we're old.
Yeah, after a certain
We're
point.
old. You can do it for your exposure when you're 20 and it's American Buffalo, but, like, don't. I have kids. I have a mortgage. Yeah. I need new shoes, right? Like, you've got to figure out a way to do it that the people you're hiring can be properly paid.
Yeah.
And if that's probably not a giant full cast production of the Oresteia. I mean, I guess it's okay to do that if everybody knows the score, but I would much rather figure out, okay, if we're only going to get 30 people a night, and I want to work with you and you and you and you and you, what can we make where at 30 people a night and whatever modest money we can raise, can everybody at least pay for their lives for the month we're working here?
Yeah.
And I think that should just be where you start as a producer.
Yeah.
And if you're don't worry, everybody, if we sell out, we'll all make $10.50. Like, it's not. Don't do that show.
Yeah.
Don't do that show, or I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's hard. It's hard to be that person. It's hard to be like the person who's like trying to do a thing, but then you also have to figure out that you got to pay people what they're worth.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know what? I shouldn't say don't do that show, because there's, like, I don't want to. That's not the kind of thing I want to do. I want to be able to at least. I don't want to be embarrassed when I write the check.
Yeah,
I might be. It's never what I want to be paying people, but I don't want to. I don't want to be the guy going, yeah, but you might get a Dora nomination.
Yeah. It's, I mean, that statue's too ugly to really.
I don't know. I've never taken one home. Although, I believe I have been told that I have the most individual nominations without ever having won in the history of the award.
Interesting.
The biggest loser in the history of the Doris.
Well,
yeah.
That's, you know what, on that note, let's stop with that. Let's stop there. But do you have a plan yet for what you're going to be doing since you're now the Halloween tradition?
Okay, so the Halloween tradition. So we're still figuring out. There's still negotiations are happening for this Halloween. We'll probably remount the Harrowing of Brimstone Macready for at least a short run. Mm-hmm. We're working on a thing called Space Opera Zero, which I mentioned. Yep. There is a new Doc Wuthergloom play called The King in Yellow Pants that's in the works. And there's also, at the really baby stages, you're the first person to find out about this. Not even everybody in the team knows this. But at the really beginning stages, there's an idea I have to adapt H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds as it would be presented by a street soap pitchman in the 1890s.
Okay. That's cool.
So those are all the things. I think that's kind of everything we're tossing around right now. Wow, but you never know. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, oh no, it's this, and then it's written, and then that's what we do.
Well, then it's like once you're committed to it and you start printing stuff, you gotta go with that.
Yeah. That's true. Once it's
once you got advertisement for the thing, the thing.
Yeah. Rue Morgue magazine one April wrote this awesome article on House at Poe Corner. And then it didn't get its grants. Oh. And we're like, but we have to. It says in this magazine, and 5 people read the magazine, and we have to do
so hard.
Yeah, well, we did it, and everybody kind of got paid. Everybody got paid, right?
I've done lots of things where nobody got paid. So kind of getting paid is also...
Yeah, well, everybody got paid, and everybody got paid a reasonable, not exorbitant, but everybody got to live for the 2 weeks we did House at Poe Corner.
That's great. That's good. I'd like to thank you for coming.
Hey, thank you for having me.
It's been great. Thank you.